Hey, what's up, everybody? True Boxing here. Thank you for coming back to get hit with the truth. So today we're doing a what's next on Jermell Charlo, the now undisputed super welterweight champion of the world at 154 pounds, following his historic, I believe it was a 10th round TKO victory over Brian Castano in a all-action fight of the year candidate and rematch from their undisputed title fight last year in July that ended in a draw, a fight that most, myself included, thought Castano won, but it was a very close fight. I had it 7-5 for Castano, so it was close. This time around, Charlo got outworked by the brawler, but he landed the better shots. He was working hard. He was countering Castano with good, hard shots. And he hurt him badly with that left hook, and then finished him with a body shot on the second knockdown, and, you know, finished him. And that was just an impressive performance by Jermell Charlo as he becomes the undisputed champion and makes history. So now the big question is, what's next for Jermell Charlo following that win? Well, you know, Charlo said it could be anything. He said prior to the fight, well, we'll get into the guys he said no to, but he said it could be anything. He's going to take some time and see what he wants to do. He also said it's possible he moves to 160 to take over that division. And I think that is very possible for Charlo. I really do. A couple things, though, in order to make that happen. One, I think his brother Jermell is going to have to move up to 168 as he pursues Canelo Alvarez at 168. But if Jermell moves to 160, he's going to want a title available, and he can if his brother moves up. If he vacates, he moves into position, because he's the WBC champion at 154, he moves into position to fight for the title at 160. But I think there's one fight that might keep him at 154, and he might take another fight in between just to hold on to as many belts as possible prior to that. And that is the potential big-time showdown against Terrence Crawford. Now, the only way I see that fight happening is if Crawford beats Errol Spence in their projected undisputed welterweight title fight, and then Crawford moves up to 154 to challenge Charlo. Now, that fight definitely can happen because, you know, Charlo and Spence are from the same area. That, you know, Crawford's been talking shit to both of them, and a win over Spence can hand him a showdown with Charlo early next year. But, you know, Charlo's gonna have to, he possibly could be fighting somewhere in between later this year before that bout. So that's why, but he might not, and he might just wait around for the winner and fight the winner early next year. He has the, you know, he definitely could do that, but we got to see what, you know, what could happen and if the fight gets made, period, between Spence and Crawford first, and then that would be the next step. But let's run through the top guys at 154 that Charlo might fight next while he waits around to move up to 160 and potentially fight the winner, or waits around for his brother, or potentially fights the winner of, or fights Terrence Crawford, because I don't think him and Errol Spence, being such good friends and fighting out of the same gym, would fight each other. So let's run through it and see. So we start with Sebastian Fundora, the Towering Inferno, the WBC interim champion. Not going to happen. He said prior to the fight he has no interest in fighting Fundora next, so you're likely going to see him vacate that belt. Once he decides on another fight, he's going to vacate that belt and either move up to 160 or wait around for a potential showdown with Terrence Crawford. He has said he's not going to fight Fundora next, even though Fundora is his mandatory in the WBC. Brian Castano, a third fight. You know what's funny is I think if he's waiting around for a potential Crawford fight and he doesn't want to risk it, I think it's very possible he could fight Brian Castano. I really do. I think he would just say, ah, fuck it, you know, fuck the belts. I'll just hold on to a couple of them, maybe 3, and I'll fight Brian Castano a third time just to leave no doubt, because the first 2 fights were very good. So I do think that one's possible. I think it's a little less likely, but I'm not going to completely rule it out because both their first 2 fights were great. And a lot of people thought Castano won the first fight. Now, he won in convincing fashion, but it was a very close, it was a close fight again. And you know, Castano landed more punches. It got late into the fight. Who knows? He might say yes to a 3rd fight, especially if he's going to wait around for a Crawford showdown that could happen early next year. So, yeah, I think it's definitely possible. Next, Tim Tszyu. He's an undefeated WBO mandatory #1 contender. He's basically fighting Charlo next, or Charlo's got to vacate. I think Tszyu, him and Castano are running neck and neck, but I think Tszyu, if Charlo decides to stay at 154, Tszyu is the likely option for him. Because Tszyu is, again, the mandatory. He has a similar style like Castano of coming straight at you. He also showed a little vulnerability in his last fight against Terrell Gausha, where he got caught. And I think, you know, because Tim Tszyu, his dad was Kostya Tszyu, it's a sellable fight against Charlo. I think that fight's definitely possible for Charlo to hold on to his world titles and stuff. So yeah, I could definitely see that fight happening next for Jermell Charlo. Then you got guys like Erickson Lubin, which would be a rematch. Not going to happen. He just got destroyed against Fundora, like really beat up, I mean destroyed. Plus Charlo knocked him out in the first round of that fight. He's just not on the level. It makes no sense. A 3rd fight with Tony Harrison. You know, another fight I'm not going to completely rule out. Tony Harrison just came up, dominated Sergio Garcia. This was it's a very sellable fight because Harrison won the first fight controversially, and then in a close fight, Charlo came back and stopped Harrison in the 11th round. Very similar to him and Castano. So, and again, Harrison just bounced back and looked very good, defeating Sergio Garcia over 10 rounds. So, wouldn't completely rule it out. I don't think it's going to happen, but again, I wouldn't completely rule it out. Then there's the potential, then we talk about Sergio Garcia. He's not an option. He's been defeated by both Erickson Lubin and not Erickson Lubin. He's been defeated by Sebastian Fundora and just recently against Tony Harrison. So that's not an option for Charlo. Then you got Terrell Gausha. Gausha's coming off of a loss, convincing loss to Tim Tszyu. Not going to happen. He's not in the conversation. Other fighters, Magomed Kurbanov, not going to happen. He's like, just doesn't bring the name to the table. So not an option for Charlo, in my opinion. Liam Smith, he's a former champ, but he fights for DAZN, and I just don't think anybody would take him as a serious threat to Charlo, so I don't see it. And then former champ Patrick Teixeira. Castano beat Teixeira. There's no point in Charlo fighting Teixeira. So if I'm Jermell Charlo, what do I overall think he's going to do next? I think it's very possible that a 3rd fight with Castano could happen, and I think it's very possible a Tim Tszyu fight can happen. I think Charlo's going to play this one smart. I think he's going to wait around and see if Lubin and Crawford are going to fight. That's the first option. And if they do, he stays at 154 and potentially fights one of 3 fights next. Castano, Tim Tszyu, or Tony Harrison. Just to stay alive and ready for a showdown early next year or the first half of next year against potentially Terrence Crawford. Now, if that is the case, then that's one option for him to stay at 154. He could also stay there. Option 2 is just wait around to see if that fight goes down, and then wait around for the winner towards the middle of next year and not fight for a full year. I wouldn't be surprised if Charlo pulled that shit off and fought Crawford a year from now, or a little less than a year from now, and instead of fighting somebody in between. Wouldn't be surprised, but I hope he stays active, Charlo. And then the last option is potentially him moving to 160, and that would happen for a couple different reasons. Either he just wants to move there now because he has a guaranteed title shot. He could take his brother's belt there, by getting a title shot, or he waits around to see what happens between Spence and Crawford, and Spence beats Crawford, so there wouldn't be a point for Charlo to fight Crawford, so he just moves up. So, you know, I think those are the options for Jermell Charlo. I really don't know what's gonna happen next, but I'm leaning towards he's gonna fight Tim Tszyu next, because I think he sees that as a winnable fight, and it's not a bad matchup. And again, Tim Tszyu, his dad, you know, his dad being Kostya Tszyu, that could sell the fight. I also think Castano in a third fight, and then Tony Harrison is possible in the third fight. But I also think it's possible he can move to 160. It's just there's not a big fight at 160 right now for him. So he would just be moving up to win a title at a second weight class, which is still a big deal. But, you know, I'm not seeing a big fight there. So we'll wait and see what happens. But that's what I got. That's the what's next on the undisputed super welterweight champion of the world, Jermell Charlo, following his career best win, his 10th round TKO victory over Brian Castano in their rematch as he became undisputed champion. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, smash the like button, leave a comment, or subscribe to the channel. I appreciate any and all support. This is True Boxing. You've been hit with the truth.